Good evening. I am Vibhu Swain from PowerTech Consultants. Today we'll start our webinar number 6. Basically, it will cover in this chapter number 1 of book 2. This one is useful for all the applicants who are appearing for energy manager as well as energy auditors. So whoever are preparing for book 4 also should listen to this book 2 chapter 1 webinar so that it will be easier for them to understand. Now let me start my slides show. So webinar number 6. Now this is chapter 1. Chapter 1 is basically fuels and combustions. In this chapter, we'll basically learn about various types of fuels like solid fuel, liquid fuel, gaseous fuels, and what is their classifications, what is their GC value, what are the properties of these fuels, and how you can handle it, how you can storage it. So, and what are the different type of liquid fuels. And as an energy auditor, it is very much essential to know the properties and classification of fuel, because by fuel switching also you can save a lot of energy. And because of fuel only, if you can know the properties of fuel, we can reduce the fuel consumptions, and by that we can achieve energy conservations. So where fuels are used in a process industries, fuels are used in boiler, furnaces, and other combustion equipments. Also, knowledge of fuel properties helps in selecting right fuel. Suppose we want to generate power, then what should be the fuel? Suppose we want to go for fertilizer plant, then what type of fuel you should use as feedstock as well as for fuel, and what is their characteristics, that will be discussing in these chapters. Now, if you see liquid fuel, particularly furnace oil and LHSs, low sulfur heavy stocks, basically LSHS, low sulfur heavy stocks are predominantly used in industrial applications. There are few properties of fuels. What are those? First one is density. It is nothing but ratio of mass of the fuel to the volume of the fuel at a reference temperature of 15 degrees centigrade. Now, density is measured by hydrometer, and what is its unit? Its unit is kg per meter cube. Then let us come to know what is specific gravity. Specific gravity is basically defined as ratio of weight of given volume of oil to the weight of same volume of water at a given temperature. That means you take the weight of the volume of a oil divided with the same volume of water to the weight of same volume of same water at a given temperature, you will get a ratio that is known as specific gravity. So the density of fuel relative to water is called specific gravity. Specific gravity has no unit. It is and what is the specific gravity of water? It will be 1, of course, and specific gravity is measured by hydrometer. Now, if you see, specific gravity of LDO is in the range of 0.85 to 0.87. Furnace oil, it is 0.89 to 0.95. And low sulfur heavy stock is 0.88 to 0.98. So, these are little bit heavier. This is little bit moderate one, and this is the lighter one. Now, viscosity. What is viscosity? Viscosity, it is the inch at which the fuel or the fluid flows. So, viscosity of a fluid is a measure of internal resistance to flow, and viscosity depends upon temperature. If the temperature increases, then viscosity decreases. Basically, viscosity is like that. What is the flowing nature of the fluid? Now, any numerical value for viscosity has no meaning unless temperature is specified. That means viscosity will have different values at different temperatures. What is the unit of viscosity? It is either strokes, centistrokes, angular, Seebold, Redoux. So these are the 5 units in which viscosity is measured. It is a normal question. Now, viscosity is measured by viscometer. Viscometer. Now, viscosity is one of the important characteristics of the fuel, and it is required. We have to know it because for storing it, for using the fuel, because if the fluid is very viscous, then we cannot be pouring it or you cannot pump it. We need to heat it so that it becomes a free flow item, and you can easily atomize it. You can easily use it in the burner. So if the oil is too viscous, it will be difficult to pump, hard to light the burner, and tough to operate. That's why, therefore, the viscosity is one of the important parameters. Now come to flash point. Flash point is basically at which the fuel will ignite. That means the flash point of a fuel is the lowest temperature at which the fuel can be converted so that fuel can be heated so that vapor gives off gases momentarily when an open flame is passed over it. That means you heat a fuel up to that lowest temperature so that the vapor will be there and it will gases momentarily if you bring a open flame to it. So flash point of furnace oil is 66 degree centigrade Celsius. That means flash point is the lowest temperature at which fuel can be ignited, or because of the vapor coming out of the fuel can be ignited. Then what is pour point? Pour point is basically is the lowest temperature at which it will pour or flow when cooled under prescribed conditions. It is a very rough indication of lowest temperature at which fuel is readily pumpable. That means it is related to viscosity. So, if you increase the temperature of the fuel or fluid, it will flow. But at what temperature it can easily flow or pour is decided by its pour point. Because by knowing the pour point, you can heat the temperature or heat the fluid to that temperature so that it will be pumpable. Now, what will happen if I increase the temperature? Yes, if you increase the temperature, there will be energy loss because there will be some carbonations, some heat loss, and will be there. So you should not heat any fluid beyond its pour point, but you have to heat it so that it can easily flow or it can be easily pumpable. Now come to specific heat. Specific heat is basically amount of kilocalorie needed to raise the temperature of 1 kg of oil. Basically, this is the specific heat of oil. So how much of heat is required to raise the temperature of 1 kg of oil by 1 degree centigrade? Its unit is kilocalorie per kg per degree centigrade. Normally, the specific heat of oil is around 0.22 to 0.28. That specific heat determines how much of steam or electrical energy it takes to heat oil to a desired temperature. Suppose you understand pour point, but you need to heat a oil. Then you should know its specific heat so that you can apply that much of heat so that it will attain its pour point and you can stop it there. But how to decide how much of heat will be applied? You can heat any oil by applying steam or electrical energy, by electrical heater, by steam energy. So that much of steam or electrical energy has to be applied to increase its temperature, and that will be governed by the specific heat of the oil. Lighter oil have a lower specific heat, whereas heavier oil have a higher specific heat. Now come to calorific value. What do you mean by calorific value? Calorific value means it is the measurement of heat or energy produced. When you heat a fuel, when you burn a fuel, the amount of heat or energy produced is known as calorific value. It has two types. One is gross calorific value, another one is net calorific value. We have already studied in chapter 1, in book 1. what is the difference between gross calorific value and net calorific value. That means any fuel will have some moistures, it will have some H2 component, hydrogen. So when you heat the fuel or burn the fuel, automatically the H2 and internal moisture inside the fuel gets react with O2 and water is formed, and it goes out as a water vapor along with the up gas or waste heat gas. Therefore, there is some heat loss is there because the water is formed, and water is formed by taking heat from the fuel only. So, if I remove the portion of the water heat loss due to H2 present in the fuel or O2 or the internal moisture present in the fuel, then I'll get MCV. So but gross calorific value assumes all vapor produced during the combustion processes is fully condensed. But MCV assumes the water leaves with the combustion product without fully being condensed. So this is the difference between latent heat of condensation of water vapor produced during the combustion processes. Normally, question comes: what do you mean by gross calorific value and net calorific value, and what is their difference? Now, if you compare gross calorific value of different type of oil, kerosene has highest GCV, that is around 11,100 kilocalorie per kg. Similarly, diesel oil is 10,800 kilocalorie per kg. LDO is 10,700 kilocalorie per kg. Furnace oil is 10,500 kilocalorie per kg, and LSHS is 10,600 kilocalorie per kg. Now, calorific value of coal, oil, gases depends upon its mass, moisture, depend upon the properties of the fuel. It keeps on changing. But if you see, fuel has or oil has a good calorific value as compared to solid fuel. Now, this is the formula. You have to remember this formula to know what is the difference between GCV and NCV. GCV is equal to NCV plus 584 9S2 plus M2 by 100. GCV is gross calorific value, NCV is net calorific value. These are unit is kilocalorie per kg. What is S2? Hydrogen by weight present in the fuel. There are some percent of hydrogen will be present in the fuel, that is S2. What is M2? M2 is moisture by weight present in the fuel. And 584 is basically latent heat corresponding to partial pressure of water vapor in kilocalorie per kg. This is latent heat. That means because of S2 and M moisture, they take some heat out of the fuel and goes out to the atmosphere along with the waste gas, due to which there is a reduction in the net calorific value. The calorific value decreases. That is known as NCV. So which one is higher? GCV is higher. NCV is little bit lower values. Now let us come to different types of fuel and their properties, and what is there inside a fuel. What is the composition of fuel? What are the major items present in the fuel? First item is, one of the item is sulfur. Basically, if you see, the sulfur present is around, in the furnace oil particularly, it will be 2 to 4%. That means some amount of sulfur is present inside the fuel, and this is due to mainly due to the source of the crude oil, from where the crude oil is collected. It is not due to any refining processes. It is associated with the geothermal or geographical. It is a geographical properties, and it is mainly depend upon the source from which the crude oil is taken out. Now, why sulfur is not good inside the fuel? Whether sulfur value should be higher or it should be lower? The desirable is that sulfur should be lower. What will happen if sulfur is there? Then automatically, when you burn the fuel, sulfur will react with oxygen of the air and it will form sulfur dioxide. Then when sulfur dioxide goes out along with the waste gas, and there will be some vapor, water vapor will be there because of the inherent moisture, because of the hydrogen present in the fuel, and they will mix up and they will form H2SO4, sulfuric acid. And if the temperature is lower, if you reduce the temperature of the waste gas to a certain lower limit, then during while going out or while exiting from the chimney, the sulfur dioxide and H2O will mix each other, form sulfur dioxide, H2SO4, sulfuric acid, and it will basically affect the tack, chimney, air heater, and economizer. It will corrode the things. So there is a disadvantage of sulfur inside the fuel. Apart from that, if sulfur dioxide goes out also, it will mix with water vapor in the atmosphere and will get acid rain. Sulfur dioxide plus H2O will get sulfuric acid and will get acid rain. Now these are the properties of what is the percentage of sulfur present in different type of fuel. Particularly furnace oil has a highest degree of sulfur. It is in the range of 2 to 4%. Now another content is ash. Basically, ash is residual content. That means if you, and it is in the range of 0.03 to 0.07%. Excessive ash in the liquid can cause fouling deposit in combustion equipment. Ash has erosive effect in the burner tips. It causes damage to refractories at high temperature and gives rise to high temperature corrosion and fouling of equipment. Basically, at high temperature, ash also melts. It gives rise to clinker. Particularly, boiler engineer knows how ash handling is very important in the boiler. And this ash at high temperature, it damages refractories. So it is desirable that ash should be low. And this ash value is particularly for the fuel oil. And there will be also a carbon residues. Carbon residue is nothing but it is the carbonous solid residues which is there in a oil. There is some amount of solid residue will be there, which is nothing but a carbon residue, and sometimes it gets deposited in the hot surface like burner and injection nozzle and get it jammed. So carbon residue should be also low in a fuel oil. Another one is water content. Water content of furnace oil, when supplied normally is very low, as the product at refinery site is handled hot. Since the fuel oil is handled in hot condition in refinery, water content is very low there, and maximum limit of water content is should be 1%. Now, if water is present in the oil, what will happen? It can be in two forms. It can be free from or in emulsified form. What damage it can cause? It can cause damages to the inside furnace surface during combustion, especially if it contains dissolved salts. That means what will happen if water contains some salt, then automatically when the temperature increases, water temperature increases, it will form scales. So water, if it contains some salt, then automatically it will form scales, and that scales will affect the particularly the basically it will affect the inside furnace surface. Inside the surface there will be corrosion and there will be scale formation, particularly due to which heat transfer will not be proper. Now plus, if water is there, then automatically the flame can be extinguished or the flame temperature will go down. So these are the disadvantages and these are the major properties of any fuel. So if you see typical specification of fuel oil, you have to remember these some values, particularly the which one is highest, which one is lowest. Now if I compare density, this is almost similar, and furnace oil is 0.89 to 0.95. Sulfur sulfur heavy stock is up to 0.98, LGO is 0.85 to 0.87. What is flash point? That means flash point basically you require more heat so that it will ignite, but LDO and furnace oil can be ignited at a lesser temperature. Pour point means you have to heat this furnace oil so that it becomes a free flow. At 20 degrees centigrade, furnace oil becomes a free flow or pumpable, but low sulfur heavy stuff will be pumpable at 72 degrees centigrade. Whereas LDO, you don't have to heat it in normal conditions. At 18 degrees centigrade, it will be pumpable. And if you compare the C values, sediment basically is the solid residues. Sulfur is highest in case of furnace oil, up to 4%. Water content is very lowest in LDO, 0.25%, and ash is almost up to 0.1% in furnace oil. Now, the next is sometimes you get some normal long question: storage of fuel oil. Storage of fuel oil means how you should handle the fuel oil. Remember, you can handle it by storing in barrels, but these are hazardous. You will get a lot of safety issues. So, best way to store the furnace oil or fuel oil or any oil in cylindrical tanks. Either you can build above ground or below the ground. And industry practice says that 10 days storage is recommended. Why? Because there will be some transportation uncertainty, there will be some fuel price hike, there will be some disturbance in the contract. So you should have 10 days storage is recommended. And these industrial heating fuel storage tanks are basically made with mild steel, and you have seen some bond wall is also constructed so that to contain the accidental spillage, and to have the safety precautions, you sometimes construct the bond walls around the tanks, so that what will happen, this is though it looks very simple, but in case some fire happens in the main component or in any one tank, then the fire will not go to the other tank because of these bond walls. Similarly, even in substation, if you might have seen, between two big power transformer which has also some oil, there is a wall is constructed to prevent spreading of fire, to prevent spillage of oil, to prevent accidents. Now, when you go for audit, if you see some amount of oil leakage, then please always try to see that it is stopped. These are very small, minor leakages, but it has very good amount of potential or good amount of energy loss can happen because of if these small leakages is not arrested. Now, remember this line: loss of even one drop of oil every second can cost you over 4,000 liters per year. Therefore, what will happen if you want to conserve energy? You have to save the oil leakage. Now, also oil contains lot of contaminant. That means whenever furnace oil arrives at factory, either in tank lorries, by rail or roll, then you have to decant it to main storage tanks. But at that time, to prevent contaminants such as rags, cotton waste, loose knots, bolts, screws, it might have entered during processes from where the tankers are coming. So if it goes inside, it may damage your pump or pore strainers. Therefore, what you do, you put strainers, and normally this is known as initial strainer is 10 ms size, 10 mesh size. That means 3 holes per linear inch. That means 10 mesh size strainer will not have more than 3 holes per linear inch. And you put up a strainer at the entry of the pipe to the storage tank so that you can remove these contaminants. Then progressively in the line, you also put finer strainers. This is known as coarse strainer, and then progressively you put finer strainers, which will have higher number of holes per linear inch, so that you can further take away or further filter the external dust and dirt. And normally these strainers are put in duplicate system. That means one, so that you can take any strainer into maintenance by keeping the other strainer in operations. So normally two-way valves are there and they are provided in duplicates. Now let us come to how these oils are handled. Now heavy fuels are best pumped using positive displacement pumps. That means if the oils are heavy, fuel particularly, then you have to use positive displacement pumps. But for LDO, what you use? You use circulation gear pump. And diaphragm pumps have also shorter life, but it is easier and less expensive to repair. Normally, we don't recommend centrifugal pumps, because as the oil viscosity increases, the efficiency of the pumps decreases. Therefore, you require more power. So centrifugal pumps are not recommended, but for lighter fuel, you can use the pump which is centrifugal or turbine pumps. But for heavier pump, you don't have to use centrifugal pumps. So then when the higher pressure is required, piston or diaphragm pumps should be used. So these are the types of pumps what we use for handling fuel oils. One is displacement pump, another one is gear pump, diaphragm pumps. Diaphragm pump, you might have heard, you might have seen, it requires both compressed air and it two diaphragm move together alternatively to give compression, so that you get pressurized pump, pressurized oil. Then how we store the fuel and what is should be the pumping temperature? As you know, viscosity of furnace oil LSHS increases with decreasing temperature. That means if you decrease the temperature, the viscosity will increase, particularly furnace oil. For galvanization plant, you require furnace oil. For your dryer, you require furnace oil. Now, if the viscosity increases due to decrease in temperature, then you cannot pump it. So, at low ambient temperature, at 25 degrees, below 25 degrees centigrade, furnace oil is not pumpable. Therefore, what we do, we either do bulk heating, that means entire tank is preheated. This is known as bulk heating, or at the you provide out flow heater. That means where the oil is going out, flowing out, you just heat it there. So this is required for where bulk heating is required, where the flow rate is very high, and where the outer heater is required, where the flow rate is minimum. That means, but whenever you put heater, you have to see that the tanks are fully insulated, the pipes lines are fully insulated, so that you can conserve some amount of heat loss, or you can conserve some amount of heat energy. Now, also sometimes you utilize steam to heat this oil. At that time also you have to insulate the tanks. And remember, you should not increase the temperature of the fuel oil to beyond its pouring point. What will happen? It will also give rise to energy loss. Now let us come to the coal. How coals are classified? As you know, we have already studied, coals are three categories particularly. The major classification into three types. One is anthracite, bituminous, and lignite. There is no clear demarcation between all these three. But you can also, coal is further classified based on semi-anthracite, semi-bituminous, and sub-bituminous. Remember, anthracite is the best coal. It is the A-grade coal. But lignite is not a good quality coal. And bituminous is the moderate coal as far as quality is concerned. So what is anthracite? It is the oldest coal. That means based on geological perspective, it is the oldest coal, and normally it is hard, mainly of carbon, and it has very little volatile content and practically no moisture. So these are the four characters: hard, oldest coal, mainly consists of carbon, little volatile, and no moisture. But whereas lignite is the youngest coal, that means it is the youngest coal from geological perspective. It is soft, but mainly composed of mainly volatile matters and moisture content with low fixed carbon. That means it is just opposite to the anthracite. You might have heard in Rajasthan there is a lignite based power plant is there. Neyveli Lignite Corporation you might have heard, that is in Tamil Nadu. So when you design a power plant in lignite based, you cannot operate it in your anthracite based, because in lignite based a lot of higher volatile matter will be there, and whereas fixed carbon will be low, but in anthracite fixed carbon will be higher. So based on fuel properties, you design your boiler so that so as to get optimum heating value and get the best efficiency. Now, if you see what is fixed carbon, then there are two, three components now we put here, 2, 3 words. One is fixed carbon, volatile matters. Fixed carbon basically the carbon in its free state, not combined with other elements. Whereas volatile matter refers to combustible constituents of fuel that vaporize when coal is heated. So this is basically carbon, which is the heat generator. Volatile matter is basically related to ignitions. That means it's basically the gases. When coal you heat a coal, the volatile matter vaporizes. So now you have to remember this calorific value table. There are A to G grades of fuels are available. Each calorific value is more than 60 to 100 kilocalorie per kg, whereas F is in the range of 2400 to 33600, 3360 kilocalorie per kg. Now, normally D, E, F grades coals are available in Indian industries. And what is D? 4200. That means from 2400 to 4940 we get in Indian industries. Now, if you see what are the difference between DCVs of different type of coal, lignite it is 4500 kilocalorie per kg, Indian coal is around 4000 kilocalorie per kg, whereas Indonesian coal is higher GCV, 5500 kilocalorie, South African is 6000 kilocalorie per kg. Now let us study about on the analysis of coal. Why analysis of coal is used? To know what is the percentage of fixed carbon, what is the percentage of volatile matter, moisture, ash, and different type of gases present, different type of constituents present inside the fuel. By analysis, it is necessary to do analysis of fuel so as to design any boiler or design any furnace. Now, there are two types of analysis. One is ultimate analysis, another one is proximate analysis. Ultimate analysis decides all components, all coal component or solid or gases, any fuel. If you are going for ultimate analysis, you will get all component of that fuel. Whereas proximate analysis will give only fixed carbon, volatile matter, moisture and ash. Remember this one. This is very important. Now, how you measure moisture? Sometimes in the exam you get question how to measure moisture, how to measure volatile matter, how to measure carbon and gas. Now, how to measure the moisture? You basically take some coal, powder it, and the sizes should be lesser than 200 microns. Micron is basically, what is micron? 1/1000 millimeter, or 10 to the power minus 3 millimeters. Micro means 10 to the power minus 6 meter. So you take a sample, powder the coal up to 200, less than 200 microns, and heat it, kept it in the oven at a temperature of what? 108 plus minus 2 degrees centigrade. Why this temperature? Because at this temperature all the water goes out, water becomes vapor, and along with the lid you heat it. Then after certain times you cool the sample, weight. Now the difference between the two is basically the loss in weight will represent the moisture. Clear? Now how to measure the volatile matters? Now take the same coal or take another coal sample, fresh coal sample, sorry, then crossed it and placed in a covered crucibles. In this case, uncovered crucibles, and heat it up in a furnace at 900 plus minus 15 degrees centigrade. Why this temperature? Because at this temperature, all the combustible gas or the volatile matters will go out. Now, once you heat it, then after that you cool the sample and make the movement. The loss in weight represents the loss in moisture and volatile matters. So the total weight, the loss in weight, from this loss in weight, you can find out what is moisture and volatile matters. Now you have already, you know already the moisture component. Now subtract it, you will get volatile matters. Now the remaining portion is basically coke, that is fixed carbon plus ash. That means if you remove moisture and volatile matter from coal, you will get coke. That is nothing but fixed carbon as well as ash. Now how to measure carbon and ash? Now you take this coke and heat over in a Bunsen burner until all the carbon is burned. Now the residue, well, whatever you get, once all the carbon component is burned, the residue you make an movement, the residue is basically nothing but ash, which is not get burnt and heat remains there. So that weight is basically ash. So from this I got moisture, volatile matters and ash. You subtract it from 100 and we get fixed carbon. So fixed carbon is derived by subtracting 100 from the value of moisture, volatile matter and ash. So basically this is the way how you analyze the coal, how you find out the moisture, volatile matter, carbon and ash. Now proximity analysis, as you know, gives rise to fixed carbon, volatile matter, ash and moisture content. Now fixed carbon is and plus volatile matter basically contributes the heating value of coal, which is the heating value, and out of which fixed carbon acts as a main heat generator during burning because it is responsible for generating the heat. But volatile matter basically indicates the easy ignition of fuel because of presence of its volatile matters inside it. Ash content is very important for designing of furnace grade, combustion volume, pollution control equipment, ash handling system. Because if you generate more ash, you require more bulkier ash handling equipment. Now, these are the typical analysis of proximity analysis of various type of coals. Indian coal, if you see, the ash is very high, whereas Indonesian coal and South African coal, ash is not there. And South African coal, fixed carbon is very high, and whereas volatile matters is also very high in Indonesian coals. But Indian coal, the fixed carbon percentage is low. Therefore, we have studied earlier that to have fuel security, sometimes Indian countries also import, or Indian industries also import Indonesian coal and South African coal. And the country gains as a fuel security, but the industry gains because of low ash and higher fixed carbon percentage. Now, as I told, fixed carbon gives rough estimate of heating value of coal, whereas volatile matter, what is there basically? It is basically these are the gases, methane, hydrocarbons, hydrogen, carbon monoxide, which are, and some percentage of incombustible gases like carbon dioxide and nitrogen. Now, volatile matter basically gives an index of the gaseous fuel present, and the range of volatile matter is normally 20 to 35%. Remember, And what volatile matters helps? It proportionally increases the flame strength because of the combustible gas present inside it, and it helps easier ignition and sets minimum limit of furnace height and volume. It influences secondary air requirement and distribution aspects, influences secondary oil support, and what ash content decides. The range of ash is 5 to 40%. It reduces handling and burning capacity. It increases handling cost, affects combustion efficiency and boiler efficiency, causes clinkering and slagging. So volatile matters, fixed carbons are desirable, whereas ash is not desirable. Moisture content is basically 0.5 to 10%, and because of moisture content, it increases the heat loss due to evaporation and separating of vapors. It helps in, but it helps. Suppose in case you get some coal, there is a lot of fines are there, but because of moisture, or sometimes you apply additional moisture or make some water spray there to remove or to so that it becomes stickier. The fines will stick to the main lumpy coal, and the losses will be fine loss will be less. Also, because of moisture, it helps good amount of radiation heat transfer, and it will help in flame stabilizations, and you get good amount of uh, radiation heat transfer. Sulfur content is not desirable at all because it corrodes chimney. As I told you earlier, it affects other equipment, air heater and economizer, because you get H2 sulfur dioxide plus H2O sulfuric acid, and it also limits exit flue gas temperature. What do you mean by that? Now, if sulfur is not there, I can reduce the temperature, exit gas temperature, to certain limit, 200 degrees centigrade or 220 degrees centigrade. Because what will happen if I limit the exit gas to temperature, I'll save lot of heat loss. But if sulfur is present, then I cannot reduce the exit gas temperature. What will happen if I reduce the exit gas temperature? Water vapor will condensate and it will stick to the chimney, or it will erode the chimney. Therefore, because of sulfur, I cannot limit the exit gas flue temperature. Now let us come to understand what is ultimate analysis. Now these are the typical ultimate analysis of a coal. This is a comparison of Indian coal as well as Indonesian coal. Now moisture is 5.98, here is 9.43%. In ultimate analysis, you measure carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, sulfur and oxygen. That means ultimate analysis indicates the various elemental chemical constituents such as carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, sulfur, and it is useful in determining the quantity of air required for combustion and volume and composition of combustion gases. So that means it is little bit detailed analysis. Proximate is little bit of approximation analysis. That means proximate decide the type of ash handling, type of pollution control equipment, type of sizing of the boiler and furnace. But this requires a detailed analysis of quantity of air required, what is the volume and composition of combustion gases, and how to calculate the flame temperature fluid of design. So whenever you design any boiler, you have to conduct proximate as well as ultimate analysis of the fuel and give it to boiler OEM manufacturer before for designing, so that they can design a good boiler for the industries. Now, if I know proximate analysis, I can know ultimate analysis. In number of industries, what happens? They don't conduct ultimate analysis. They only conduct proximate analysis because of availability of laboratory equipment. And for ultimate analysis, they conduct through a third party enable accredited laboratories. In the PAT, who are DC, if you see PAT rules, ultimate analysis has to be conducted by third party enabled accredited laboratories. And whereas proximate analysis can be done inside the plant, and you have to daily record the proximate analysis. So if I know proximate analysis, I can know ultimate analysis. What is percentage C? 0.97 C, 0.7 into Vm minus 0.1 A minus M, 0.6 minus 0.01 M. So what is C here? With carbon, A is ash, Vm is volatile matter, M is moisture. You have to remember this formula. You will get some numericals out of it. This formula has to be remembered. And this equation is valid for coal containing greater than 15% moisture content. Now come to how you store coal, how you handle coal, how you prepare coal. What will happen basically? Why we store coal? Because of uncertainty in availability and uncertainty in transportation. Therefore, we require store. But whereas in quick-head power plant, there is low amount of or lesser amount of uncertainty. So normally all the coal are mined and go to the power plant in a belt conveyor in a heated thermal power station. But whereas in case of port-based power plant or in case of the remotely located power plant, you require to store the coal. Because if you stop coal, it has disadvantages. What are the disadvantages? That it build up inventory, cost will be there, space constraint will be there, and the quality will also deteriorate. There will be potential fire hazards will be there. And because of when you stock coal or for a longer time, what will happen? The coal will go for oxidation. That means because of the pressure, there will be increase in the temperature. If the stack height is beyond 6 meter or 10 meter stack height is there, particularly in a cold storage yard, then because of the pressure, there will be temperature rise will be there inside the stack, particularly at the below or the bottom of the stack. And because of this increase in temperature, the coal starts oxidation. That means coal starts burning, and this coal will convert it to ash. So 1% oxidation means 1% increase in ash in the coal. Plus windage loss is there. That means there will be carpet loss, because the carpet loss means the once you stock the coal at the in the soil, then in the carpet there will be some losses will be there. It will mix with soil and it will be very difficult to recover all the coal. So to remove or to reduce carpet loss, normally industry what it does, it makes concrete coal storage yard, and it makes also good amount of saving in that case. So how you prepare for coal? Basically, if you get coal from the mines, you will be large and irregular lumps will be there. So it needs to be crushed. It needs to be sized properly, so that before going into boiler or before going to a furnace, it has to be properly crushed and sized. What will happen if I put all these large and irregular lumps of coal inside the boiler? It will lead to poor combustion. Combustion will not be good, and the temperature will not be adequate, and there will be excess air requirement will be there, due to which lot of draft loss will be there. There will be excess air flue gas loss will be there. The ID fan loading will go up. The all the combustion equipment sizing will go up, and there will be increase in unburnt in the ashes, because all the coal will not get burnt completely in the process, so we will get burnt in the ash. So low thermal efficiency also will be there. So you need to prepare the coal well to reduce all these disadvantages and to achieve energy efficiency. How you size a coal? Basically by crushing or by pulverizing. And normally the coal size is basically limited up to 6 mm per 4 mm. That means top size is within 6 mm, 4 mm. So that after crushing you should get, and this will be good to feed in to the system. And the device most commonly used for crushing are rotary breaker, roll crusher, and hammer mills. Sometimes you also use screens and magnetic separator in the coal processing. Why screens? Because if the coal has been crushed enough, then there is no further crushing. So in the screen, you separate the crushed coal or the fine coal, it goes directly to the bunker, and the higher size coal gets crushed in the crusher. And why magnetic separator? Because when it comes from the mines, there may be some iron, there may be some nut, bolts, everything, and it goes to electrical magnetic separator. In the process, it picks up the iron, nickel, cobalt type of things, so that your pressure is not get jammed or the teeth are not broken. Then conditioning of coals. Conditioning coal means if there is a lot of fines, what will happen? There will be fine loss. And this fine will go into the grate or it will go to the furnace chamber, and there will be lot of losses because this will not stick to the megar lump, and this fines will fail from the grate bar. To reduce fine loss, what you apply? You apply some water, you apply some surface moisture so that the fines will stick to the main coal. Normally, this will reduce your energy, this will increase your energy consumption, but this required to remove your coal loss or reduce your coal loss. Also, you require some amount of energy already there in the fines which needs to be collected. Now, while tempering, this is known as tempering or conditioning of coal, that means mixing with water. While tempering of coal, care should be taken so that moisture addition is uniform. And what is this fines? Fines, if it is 10 to 15%, you have to, the surface moisture should be 4 to 5%. If the fines is 25 to 30%, surface moisture should be 7 to 8%. Now, come to blending of coals. Now, let us understand, you got good high calorific value coal from different mines, and you got very low calorific value from different mines. Now, while mixing, but your boiler is designed for a specific grade of coal, having same some well-defined parameters. So, to have that, we normally blend coal. That means we blend different type of GCV coal or different type of quality of coal, so that to attain the desired parameter which is mentioned in the design criteria of the boiler. Now, you have to also lumped coal is mixed with fines coal, that is physically matching the parameters. Higher GCV with lower GCV coal is also mixed. So normally, coal blending helps to limit the extent of fines in coal being had not more than 25%. Blending of different quality of coal may also help to supply uniform coal feeder to the boiler. The coal feed to the boiler will be uniform if you blend the coal. Now let us come to what are the properties of gaseous fuel. There are various types of gaseous fuel. One is LPG, liquefied petroleum gas, natural gas, producer gas, blast furnace gas, coke oven gas. Basically, these are two are waste gas, and producer gas is also produced, and natural gas and LPG. And this calorific value of gaseous fuel is normally written as unit is kilocalorie per mmq, and at normal temperature of 20 degrees centigrade and at a pressure of 760 mmHg. Now come here, calorific value. What is the calorific value? Is defined here. Most of the gas combustion appliances cannot utilize the heat content of water. So normally calorific value of gaseous fuel are expressed in NCV, net calorific value, and we don't denote any gross calorific value for the gaseous fuel, because why? The heat content of water is not utilized in case of gas combustion appliances. Now, natural gas calorific value is 9350 kilocalorie per NMQ. Propane is very high, 22,200 kilocalorie per NMQ. Butane is 28,500 kilocalorie per NMQ. Air fuel ratio means how much of air is required per mmQ of fuel. That means for burning this fuel, how much of air will be required. If you see, butane requires more air for same quantum of same amount of fuel. This is the flame temperature and this is the flame speed. Butane has highest flame speed and has highest calorific or heating values. What is LPG? LPG is basically what you burn or what you use in your kitchen. It is liquefied propane gas. It is mainly consist of C3H2, propane. Propylene is C3H6. Isobutane is C4H10, butylene is C4H8. So LPG is basically propylene and propane and butane, and some amount of propylene and butylene. And normally it is pressurized so that it will be easier to handle, it will be easier to transport it, but it is used only as gases. That means in your tank, in your cylinder, you pressurize these gases so that it is in liquid form. Then you transport from the dealer's point to your distributor point to your kitchen or your home and use it. Now, liquid LPG evaporates to produce about 250 times of volume of gas. Now, what is natural gas? Main component of natural gas is normally methane. Methane is the main constituent of natural gas, and it accounts almost 95% of the total volume. So, and natural gas has a high calorific value and it does not require storage. If you see any fertilizer plant or any power plant utilizing natural gas, it does not store it. They don't store it. There is a pipeline, there is a pressure in the pipeline, there is a flow in the pipeline. You just tap it from the GAIL pipeline and you use it. Therefore, to have fuel security, you have to construct gas pipeline from source to your point of destination or point of use, because you cannot store natural gas, it has to be used. And these are the comparison of chemical composition of various fuel oil, coal and natural gas. These are the comparisons. You have to remember it little bit. And if you see, carbon is very high in fuel oil, and whereas sulfur is very low in natural gas. Now let us come to agro residues. So agro residues means these are basically biomass based fuel. That means rice husks, coconut shells, groundnut shells, coffee husks, wheat stalks. These are the agro waste or forest waste which are utilized in particularly as biomass in your biomass based power plant. In case of also you have some biogas based power plant where the cow dung is used, but in case of biomass these are used as fuel. How you prepare it? You collect it from different mandis by utilizing the youth, by utilizing the women, because collection is very key. It is not located at one place. Then you collect it, bundled it, then transport it to a power plant, then burn it. These are basically renewable type of, these are covered under renewable energy, and this is not a fossil fuel based power plant. These are renewable energy based power plant. Why we go for biomass based power plant? Why biomass is treated as renewable whereas coal is treated as non-renewable? Because these are carbon neutral, and whatever you are growing you are consuming, and so whatever carbon dioxide they are taking, this fuel or this rice husk or the coconut shell are taking, that again is being released. So these are, they are taking the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and releasing after burning to the same atmosphere. So these are carbon neutral, therefore it is known as renewable energy based power plant. And fuel switching, if you consume this fuel, particularly rice husk, coconut, wheat stalk, coffee husk, etc., you should not be worried, because for the fuel consumption these are normally given credit, and normally energy auditor has to advise fuel switching from coal to paddy house. If some paddy house is available, you have to use it. If you remember Punjab and other states, that used to burn it in the paddy field, it gives rise to lot of smoke. So Punjab government has thought forward, and they are going up lot of biomass based power plant in the Punjab itself. Desi Power you might be heard. Sullivan Green Energy also have a 20 megawatt power plant in Odisha. And these are the proximate analysis of typical agro residues. And if you see GCV wise, the sawdust has a very good high GCV, and otherwise paddy house is around 3568, and they have very low sulfur content, which is also good, and but they have a good mineral matter. So you have to remember this little bit table and the use, and how biomass is collected, how they are processed. so that it will be easier for you. So in this session, particularly the agro residue are important. You require some collections, then chopping, processing it, and utilizing it in the industries. So in this session, we have studied about different types of fuel, solid fuel, gaseous fuel, liquid fuel, and the types of handling, how you store it, how you process this fuel, what are the analysis of fuel, proximate analysis, ultimate analysis, what are the parameters are being measured in proximate analysis and ultimate analysis, what is the relationship between proximate analysis and ultimate analysis, and what is the relation between GCB and NCP. So these are the important questions, and you will get some good long question out of this. With this, I conclude the first portion of chapter 1 of book 2, and now we'll be doing some assignments. Thank you.